It's that super flow, no, she my flow. Yeah, it's that.
So in the last classes, we have seen what is a abstract class, what is inheritance, all those things. In a today's class, we will be starting with our third unit, that is a string handling. And with respect to last units, we have just missed one concept, that is access means access specifiers for the class, right? So that is the topic, like a public, private, protected, all those things we have not discussed that one. So I will schedule some extra class for that, so that we will finish complete all the modifiers in a one single session, right? So that session might be some 2 hours. Okay, so not during the regular classes, some other extra class, right? So because we are already lagging with the syllabus. Okay, coming to a string handling, that is a third unit. Few points I need to specify you before we start with the string handling. Listen to these points very carefully. Point number one, if at all, if you are going for interviews on Java development, right? If at all, if you are going for the interview in a Java development, 99% times, 99% times, at least you will hear one question from a strings, right? This is the first point. The second point, if anybody is interested in taking a certification exams in a Java, right? If you are taking any certification exams in a Java, out of 60 questions, minimum of some 20 questions, either directly or indirectly, will be having a concept of strings in it, right? Now, do you feel, sir, you are highlighting these many things before starting with even a single point of a string. So what is the necessity of this one? See, I'm not considering this particular string as, I'm not the only one person who is considering a string as a more important. Even Java people itself, they have considered it as a more important, right? So why am I saying this particular statement? Because whenever you write a main program, public static void main, what is the argument you are passing? String array of args, right? They have not specified like an integer array, they have not specified like some double array, right? They have specified as a string array. Why they have considered as a string array? Because string is the only data type which has been used more frequently when it comes to a real world application development, right? So you will be having a minimum, so means when compared to a strings, the requirement with respect to other data types will be a very less, right? So that is the only reason why Java, so means why the main function in a Java is a taking argument of a strings itself, right? So what does it mean? Command line argument, that means whenever you are passing some argument for the function, that means for the main function, everything it will considered as a string only, correct? So this particular concept of a strings with respect to a Java is more important than any other data types, and this particular data type will be used more frequently with respect to any real world applications also, right? So keeping all these points in the mind, let us proceed with what is a string and how the strings will be considered in a Java system, that means a Java environment, how the strings will be considered, right? So till now we might have just a scene like a string str is equal to some abc, whether we have a worker with that particular kind of a string. Yes, yes, some constructor, when we were writing a program on a constructors, there we have seen some string name is equal to some abc, like that, right? So now we will discuss in detail how exactly the strings are going to be used. So means how the strings are stored in internally in the system, and what exactly the strings are, right? So let me proceed with the string handling. So first, means today we have a 2 sessions, right? In a first session we will understand how the strings will be stored. If possible, we will cover the some constructors of a string. Then in the next session, we need to discuss functions related to a strings, right? First, basic introduction. Second, constructors with respect to string. Third, the functions with respect to string. Clear? Shall we proceed? Yes. Introduction. Java implements the strings as objects of a type string. This helps in a building efficient string handling functions, right? So what it is saying, if you are writing any string, if you are specifying a string abc, string str, right? So it will be considered as object of class string, right? So Java implements strings as objects of type string. That means if you are writing a string means then you are creating object of that particular string. This helps in building efficient string handling function, right? By making like this, you are building an efficient string handling function. How we are building, we will see in the later sections, right? String objects are immutable. String objects are immutable. Huh. Let me proceed with the further points, then we will see what exactly is immutable, right? So what is the immutable says? Each time you change the contents of the object, a new object is created and the object values cannot be changed. Is it looking like some Latin statement? I didn't understood anything. Let me read a statement in a more slower fashion. Each time you change the contents of the object, a new object is created and the object values cannot be changed. What does this means? That means once you create object, then the values are fixed. Immutable. Immutable in the sense cannot change. Mutable means can be changed. Following, right? Mutable. I'm saying a general meaning. Mutable in the sense can be changed. Immutable in the sense cannot be changed. Correct? So what we are saying is our strings are immutable. Immutable means once you put a values, you cannot change the values in that one. Oh, is it not looking as strange? What does the statement say? The statement says that each time you change the contents of the object, a new object is created. Okay, new object is created and the object values cannot be changed. Okay, so we will see that one programmatically, but have a clear idea about. I mean, just to remember the statement. Later we will justify what exactly this statement means through a program, right? So what does the statement says? String objects are immutable. Immutable in the sense what? Once you put a value, if you are changing that particular content, new object will be created. Existing values will not change, right? So this is a meaning of that. Keep this particular point in mind, then we will see the justifying a program for this one. Mutable objects, this means these string objects are immutable, that is fine. Can we have some mutable objects? Mutable objects in the sense once I change a value, new object should not be created. New object should not be created, right? Can I do something like that? Yes, you can have a mutable objects by using a something called as string buffer and a string builder, right? Instead of using a strings, you have a something called as string buffer and a string builder. If you are going with these two things, your content can be mutable. Mutable in the sense you can change that particular content, right? Got the difference between immutable and a mutable? Immutable in the sense once you put a value, you cannot change a value. If you are changing a value, then a new object will be created. This is immutable. What does a mutable says? Mutable says that once you have given a value, If you are changing that particular value, yes, okay, no, fine. It will accept those changes and a new object will not be created. Right? So what? Let me just try to relate this one with a scenario. Say for example, in a plate, if you have a one dosa, right? If that particular plate is of a string type, okay. So for every dosa, it will be expecting a new plate. Are you able to understand? String is immutable. Immutable in the sense, once you put a one particular dosa, then that particular dosa is for that particular plate. Right? If you are changing that particular content, then a new object will be created. That means if you are putting a one more dosa, then it is saying that it requires a one more plate. Right? So what is a mutable sense? Mutable in the sense it is ready to accept the changes. That means only one plate is used even if you are having even if you want to put some 100 dosas in it. Understood the analogy? So means I am just trying to explain you what is a mutable and what is immutable. Okay, mutable in the sense can be changed. Mutable. Immutable in the sense cannot be changed. Once you put a value, then it is final. If you are trying to change, new object will be created. Clear with the two terms, mutable, immutable?
Yes, sir.
Now we are saying strings are immutable and a string buffer, string builder are mutable. We will see how exactly those things are immutable, how it is not immutable. Right? So I just wanted to make a clarification what is a mutable and what is a immutable. Right. So let us proceed with the next point. All three classes are declared as a final. All three classes in the sense your string builder, string buffer, all these three classes are final class, right? Once you make some class as a final, you cannot extend that particular class, so they don't have any subclasses for it. Okay. They implement char sequence interface. We have not yet started with the interface. Don't worry about that. Just keep in mind that it will be implementing a interface called a character sequence. We will discuss later once we start with the interfaces. Right. Okay. So till this particular means with respect to all these 4 points, I think there should not be any doubt with respect to last point because we have not yet discussed the interfaces one. If you have any clarification need to be given with respect to immutable and immutable, you just ping me in a chat box. If not, we will see an example of that particular aspect. Shall we see an example? Okay. So let me write a string yes is equal to ABC. Am I creating a string now? Yes, you are creating a string. You said like string yes is equal to in a double quote ABC. Right. Now, if I perform yes dot concat, what does a concat means? Concat means joining a two strings. Right. If I say yes dot concat, if I say yes dot concat, that means joining a two strings. Okay. If I write yes dot, that means on this particular string, yes, on this particular string called yes, I wanted to perform concat, right? So just assume the scenario what I said, this yes is nothing but a plate, right? This ABC is nothing but a dosa. Okay, let me write it as a dosa only. Why? Let me take this particular yes as a plate only. Now what I'm saying is on a plate already I have put a one dosa, right? Concat means add, join, concat, correct? So here I will say one more dosa, correct? So what I have done, plate dot concat as one more dosa. That means first it was having a one dosa, now I am concatenating with the one more dosa, right? So let me try to print whatever is the value in a plate. System.out.println what is the content of the plate. I'm just checking what might be the content that is there on a plate when I have put two things on a single plate, right? Compiled, that is my file name. What should be the output? So let us just cross check what it will print if I am doing a string concat. What happened to that one more dosa? This is what we have said, what is called as immutable property. Immutable in the sense, in a plate, if you have a one dosa, later if you are trying to put one more dosa, that one more dosa will not be taken. If you want it to take one more dosa, then a new object will be created, right? New object will be created. This particular concatenation will be done. There will be a one more dosa string will be created, but it will not be saved in a existing plate. Rather, it will be creating a one more plate. There it will be having that particular aspect. Now what I mean to say is, here if I am writing string yes is equal to, right, here if I try this particular content of a yes, right, with respect to yes, I will be having a spelling mistake. Yes should be capital. Dosa, one more dosa. Got the idea of immutable? Got idea? Any clarification? Any questions? According to this particular program, if I am trying to print the content of a plate, it was showing me only those. A lot set of questions need to be asked, because this is some kind of a magic what you have seen now. Sir, but we said that concat is used to join. What happened to concat? Say that only I am saying you. Once you concat, you are changing the content. When you are changing the content, new object will be created. If you are handling that particular new object, then the new value should be there with you.
Sir, but in the output, it printed the only dosa.
Yeah, that only I said you. See, it is printing only this particular value. If I am doing this particular operation, when I am doing a plate dot concat, that means I am modifying whatever is the content of a plate, right? Now plate will be added with one more string. That means if you are trying to change a value, one more object will be created, right? When it is creating one more object, I am not equating with this one with a new object created, right? Be clear.
No, sir, don't confuse. Sir.
Confused. Okay, so let me clarify you the things. This initialization is clear, right? Initially,
Yes.
plate is an object which is having that particular dosa, right?
Yes.
Later, what you have done is you told plate should be concatenated with whatever is the content you have. For that particular content, you add one more dosa, you said, right? So now what is the problem it is saying is, no, my boss, I already have a dosa in my plate. Now I cannot take a your value. If I will take a your value, then I will be having a new object created, right? New object created with a new content, right? So what does it mean is, say for example, if I am writing here plate is equal to plate dot concat, that means the new content of a plate, should be already existing content should be added with a one more dosa. If I am equating this, what does it means? After this particular operation, you are creating new object, right? that particular newly created object I'm going to add to a plate, right? So if I execute a program now, it will show me a concatenated value. I think I didn't save this. Right? So what is the conclusion is, whenever for an existing string, if you are modifying the value, then new object will be created. Whenever a new object is created, it is your responsibility to handle that particular object, right? Your responsibility in the sense, either you are creating new object and holding that particular changed value, or with respect to existing object you wanted to store a new value or not. Program of a 3 lines is changing some theoretical aspects. Clear? Shall I proceed with some more explanation about these lines?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now, how exactly the things will be stored in a system, right? Internally, in a memory architecture. Okay. Whenever you create a string, you will be having a heap memory, right? Internally in a memory, you will be having a heap memory. Under that particular heap memory, you will be having a something called as SCP, right? What is SCP? SCP is nothing but string constant pool. There will be a something called as string constant pool. Okay, whenever you are creating a string, that particular entry will be stored in SCP, right? Whenever you create a string, that particular entry will be stored in a SCP. Okay, so according to my statement, when I am writing a string plate is equal to dosa, right? Now in a heap memory there will be a something called as a dosa added into a string pool, and that particular dosa will be pointed with the object called a plate, right? Are you able to understand the things in a diagrammatical fashion? What I'm saying is, there is a one string constant pool. Under that particular string constant pool there will be an entry for a dosa, and that will be pointed with a name called a plate, right? When you perform concat operation, right, when you perform on an existing object, on existing plate, if you are performing a concat, we have said a new entry will be created. That means new object is created, right? So what will be your new object? Your new object is nothing but dosa followed by one more dosa, right? So now can you imagine, in a string pool now you will be having a two entries. What are those two entries? First entries will be a dosa, and the second entry is dosa one more dosa, right? Now who will be pointing to this particular dosa one more dosa? The same plate object, same plate object. Now it will not be pointing to a first entry of a dosa, rather it will be pointing to a second entry which is called as a dosa one more. What about then a previous value, that is a dosa? That will be ready for a garbage collection. Did I say something very illusionary kind of a stuff? Consider this one as your string constant pool. In this particular string constant pool, first entry will be with respect to something called as a dosa, and I'm saying that this particular dosa will be pointed with object called a plate. This particular dosa now will be pointed with this particular plate. What I'm saying is, once you perform a concatenate, you are creating one more string, right? So what is that one more string you are creating? That is nothing but, first it will be a dosa, then it will be a one more dosa, right? So now what about this one? What I'm saying is, now the plate, now this plate is pointed for this particular new value, and a previous value can be taken by your garbage collector, because you don't have anybody who is pointing to this particular plate. This means this particular dosa, because the plate is pointing to a this particular value. Is this clear? This is a most of the times asked a question. Even in interviews, they will ask you a statement saying that string is immutable. Can you explain how? Right? If you are taking some time to explain, then they will feel that this person don't know the concept. He is just interested in creating a string str is equal to something something. You don't know how internally things are going to happen. Right? So the important point is whenever you change some values with respect to a string, it will be creating a new object. Then you have to handle that newly created object. If you are not handling that particular object, you will be having a content which is retained previously and a new object. If you are not referring, then it will be a waste. Clear? Any questions? Still confusion? Didn't understood whatever I have said? Got some clarity?
Yes, sir.
Clarity. Okay. So let us see a small video on this particular explanation because I don't have a chalk and a board to explain the things diagrammatically. So I have referred one particular video for demonstrating how the strings will be stored internally. I'll just play the video.
Now, when you talk about mutability, there's one person who I admire a lot, and he says mutability is a crime, and we all are criminals, right? We always change those data, right? So when you say mutation, it means change, right? So let's say if you have an object and you want to change the values, then you are doing mutation. So we need to make sure that we are doing something which will not mutate it. So there are certain things. If you want to increase the performance of your system, make it immutable, right? So make your object as immutable so that it will increase the performance. So strings are immutable because we want to increase the performance, right? And let's see how to do that. So what happens is, normally we write this statement which is string str equal to, let's say, if I write my name, which is Naveen, okay, make sure it is I, okay? People normally search me with Naveen, it's not that, it's Navin, okay? So it's Navin, Reddy, don't use double E there. Now, let's say we have this name which is string str equal to Naveen. Now, in this we have, that's a string, right? So what happens is, inside your heap memory, we have something called as, not this small, let me take a big area. So inside your heap memory, you'll be having something called as, it is called as string pool. So inside your heap memory, you'll be having something called string pool. So now if I say string str equal to Naveen, okay, so this will go inside this, and there will be a variable, there will be a value called as Naveen, okay? And now this Naveen will have a unique address. Let's name it as 101. Now what will happen if I create a new variable as string str1 equal to Naveen? Okay, the same object now, okay? So we have the same value, but we have str1. So what will happen in this? It will not create new object. Now inside your string pool, since we already have Naveen, it will not create new object. Both of this will refer to the same object, right? So there will be a stack memory, right? Normally what happens is, whenever you create an object, you use two memories. One, you use a stack memory, right? And then you use the heap memory. So objects are normally created inside heap memory, and the reference, which is str and str1, which are variables, right, which will be inside your stack memory. And somewhere here you mention that this is str, right, and you will mention 101, and since str1 is also 101, so now we have two variables which are pointing to the same object. Now what if I take str, okay, this is the first variable, and if I say str equal to Reddy, if I change this, now what will happen? Will it change the existing name? Of course not, right? Because if str is changing to Reddy, if I change this one to Reddy 101, that means it will also affect str1, right? So that should not be the case, right? That's why this will create a new object here, and the value of that will be Reddy, and let's say this is 103. Now 101 will be replaced by 103. That means you are changing the value of the reference, but you are not changing the actual value, and that is what makes strings as immutable. You cannot change the value, okay? So once you have defined the string, you cannot change it.
With respect to a diagram, with respect to a program, whatever he has written, concentrate one thing. Initially, he has taken a string str is equal to Naveen, and later he is writing str is equal to Reddy again, right? So what I'm saying is, initially this was the value in a str, and later you are doing that particular, you are changing the content of a str with a Reddy, right? So once you are changing this particular content, what I said is there will be a new entry written in a string constant pool. Actually, this will be called as a string constant pool, not just a string pool. In a string constant pool, you will be having a one more entry that is nothing but a Reddy, right? So now this particular str, whatever he has created later, this particular str will be pointing to a new value Reddy and not for the old value called a Naveen, right? So what happens to this particular Naveen? Here in this case, there is a str1 which is pointing to a Naveen. Say for example, if this str1 is not there, you have just created string str is equal to Naveen and you have replaced str is equal to Reddy later, right? So when this particular str is pointing to a Reddy, if a Naveen is not having any reference, then this particular Naveen is ready for a garbage collection, right? So this is how the
So this is the object which are not changing. You are just creating new object. So every time you change the value of str, you are actually changing the address, but you're actually creating the new object, but you're not changing the existing values. Okay, and that's why strings are immutable. But then question arises, we have one more way of creating string, right? We can say string s1 equal to new string, and in bracket you can pass Naveen, right? Even this, you can do this, right? Then you will think, whenever you use new keyword, that means it will not use heap memory, or it will not use string pool memory, right? It will create a new object here, and let's say the address is 201. Okay, so because you are saying new, so new will not take the memory from string pool. It will use the memory of heap. Here we are not using any new keyword. That's why we are using string pool, right? So since we are using new, it will use the object here, which is the inside heap memory. You will be having an object, and that object will have Naveen. But hold on, that's not the case. Every time you say Naveen, it will actually use the memory of string pool. Okay, that's the dependencies here. So this Naveen will be also coming from this Naveen here. So of course you're using a string pool memory indirectly. Okay, so this Naveen will be coming from string pool. So this str here will have a memory address which is 101. So that's the problem with all the stuff. So even if you are saying Naveen, that will use a string pool memory. But then question arises, how to make it mutable? And so can we make string mutable? Yes, we have two ways of doing it. The one way is using string buffer, and the another way is using string builder. Of course, we have the practical implementation of those in this series. So this is the theory of why string is immutable. Okay, so first it increases the performance of the system. Second, every time you create a variable, because two reference can share the same object, right? This is actually called as flyweight pattern. So in design patterns, we have a concept of flyweight, which means if possible we can actually reuse the objects. I mean, two references are using the same object. So that's about why string is immutable.
okay, so that is the story of what is called as string immutable, right? So the clarification is with respect to the creation of objects should be clear. If you are creating an object, if you are creating a string object, then there will be an entry made in a string constant pool, right? So once an entry made in a string constant pool, that is a final, that means immutable, cannot be changed. If at all, if you are trying to change, then new object will be created and a new entry will be there in a string constant pool. Clear with the statement of string is immutable? Clear with the statement called a string is immutable? Understood how to show that particular characteristic? If someone asks you like justify how the strings are immutable, you should be in a position to write a program and explain this is a reason why it has created a new object and a string is immutable one. Okay, so the next question what we need to answer is why this particular complication has been done, why the string has to be made as a immutable. What was the problem if it was made as a just a mutable like a string buffer or a string builder? Question to be asked, right? Why this is made as a immutable one? Why can't it be a mutable? Why it is creating objects every time? If it is creating a more objects, won't it be a memory usage will be a more? When the memory usage is more, then obviously performance will be a less. Oh my God! Once again, what a kind of a complication you are increasing, right? Am I asking a valid question? We said that it is a immutable. Immutable in the sense once you are changing a value, it is creating a new object, right? If my intention is to perform a concatenation so many times in a program, if my intention is to append things into a particular string so many times, every time will it be creating a new strings for me, new objects for me? When it creating a more number of objects, won't it reduce the performance of my particular program? Yes, all things whatever I am saying is correct, but understand one more scenario, something like this. Say for example, you have a something called as string place is equal to some, or one second, let me try to relate a things. Instead of taking a place, I will take a string team is equal to RCB, right? So now I just wanted to have some set of values in the sense I wanted to just have a set of people who like this particular RCB. That means for everybody, right? So for everybody this particular value remains the same. That means if I am writing st string, I'll say for a person 1 it's RCB for a person 1, for a person 2 I say for him also this is RCB, right? I'm giving you a broader picture. String p3 is equal to, in a double quote, same RCB, right? So let me copy this one, right? 3 is okay. I'll make it as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now what happens? How many objects created? 9 objects created. Is it so? 9 objects created? No, 9 references created. How many values are there in a string constant pool? Only one value is there. What is that? RCB. Understanding? Whenever it is going to create object, whenever it is going to create object, it will just check whether that particular content is there in a string constant pool or not. If it is there, then the pointer will be pointing to that particular existing content. If it is not there, then only the object will be created. Understood? If I am writing this particular set of statements internally inside a system, what I am saying is there will be only one entry in a constant string constant pool, that is nothing but a RCB, and all these P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, all these things will be pointing to this particular same entry in a string constant pool, right? So in a real world, if you are having some values which you are saving constantly, say for example, for you wanted to gather a location of a particular employee, right? So you have if you have some 2000 employees in your office, so for almost 2000 people, some 100 to 200 will be a common, like they belong to some normal place, some common place. For all those common place entries, there will be only one particular object created, right? Are you able to understand what is the strength of making a strings as immutable? When it is immutable, then there will be only one entry. Okay, if you are modifying that entry, if you are modifying, then only there will be a change, then only the new object will be created. If you are not modifying, right, if a new object, so means if a new person is also pointing to a same value, then he will be allowed to point, no new object will be created explicitly, right? So later if I say this P1 is pointing to RCB, later I will say that this P1 has changed to some MI, Mumbai Indians, right? So I'm changing the content of this P1, right? I'm changing the content of this P1. Now there will be a object, new object created, which will be pointing to this particular MI, right? So whenever you are changing the content, new object will be created. Whenever you are changing the content of a string, then new object will be created in the memory, right? So if someone asks you like what is the immutable property of a string, justify with an example, you should be in a position to write an example and justify. Later if they cross question you saying that is it not going to reduce the performance of your program, right? This is how similarly the questions will be asked in the interviews. First they will make you comfortable, they will just ask you what is a string. General tendency, felt very happy by hearing that particular statement, you will say collection of characters is nothing but a string, and a string constant will be quoted in a double quote. You will feel satisfied, you answered something. The next question will come, do you feel like strings are immutable? They will ask you a question. You will say, yes sir, strings are immutable, and string buffer, string builder are immutable. Then immediately will, oh is it so? Can you just justify with an example? Then a few people will feel difficulty. They don't know programmatically how to show that particular concept of immutability. Right? Okay. Somehow you remember this particular program and shown, right? So this is the reason, sir, why this is called as immutable. Okay. Immediately they will ask you a next question saying that, okay, when you are creating objects every time, when you are changing a small values also, that means even if there is a small change with respect to value, it is creating a new object. Won't it reduce the performance of your program? Right? Then your answer should be something like this. Yes, when you are creating a more number of objects, if you are changing a content regularly, then why you want to go with the strings, man? You go with a string buffer or a string builder. Right? So what is the purpose of making a string? String is nothing but a constant value. Right? If you want to have this particular value, so in this scenario, it is reducing, so means it is making your program more efficient, right? More efficient. Only one entry in the pool, right? So with respect to all one entry, you are pointing a 9 pointers for that, right? Is it making your work easy? Is it reducing the memory allocated for all these things? If it was not having a immutable property, then you might have created 9 different objects for these things, right? So this is the only reason this particular question is a very much asked a question, because there will means with respect to this question there will be a possibility of asking a question in a different fashion, and at the same way it will show you how strong you are with the programs and how strong you are with respect to a theoretical aspect also. A question in the chat box. Sir, when we create a new object, value of a P1 will be changed? Yes, now P1 will be pointing to a new content. Whenever you assign some value, then a P1 will be created once again. That means object will be created once again. There will be a new entry in a heap memory. Once a value changes, there will be a new entry in a string constant pool. If you have any questions, you can post those questions. And once again, I'm telling you, this particular discussion about a string immutable is very, very important to understand the core concept of a strings. And this question is very, very important with respect to interview point of view. Right? If you have any questions, you can post those questions in a chat box. A question in a chat box. Sir, what if we want P1 to be replaced by M1? Now I am doing that one itself. I am assigning mi to the p1. Now p1 will be having mi itself. But what I'm saying is, if I'm writing a p1 is equal to mi, then this particular p1 will be a new object I'm saying. That means this mi will be a new entry in a string constant pool. New entry in a string constant pool. If you want me to split this particular statements and explain you, it will be a something like this. Say for example, initially you have created a string p1 is equal to rcb, right? So in a string constant pool, I am saying a string constant pool, you will be having a content called rcb and it will be pointing with the p1, right? Now I say p2 is equal to again rcb, right? As rcb is already there in a string constant pool, there will not be one more entry, right? Just a p2 will be pointing to existing a content called a rcb. Now if I am writing a string p3, that means p3 person 3 is equal to again rcb. As rcb is already there in a string constant pool, one more entry will not be done, right? Now p3 will be pointing to a existing rcb itself, right? No new object is created. For existing object you are creating a references. If I am writing string p4, that means person 4 is equal to rcb, what I'm doing, entry is there already, so new object will not be created. For existing object p4 will be pointed now, right? If I am saying now p1 should be occupied with the mi, right? If I say p1 should be occupied with the mi, so what does the mi means? Mi, is it there in a string constant pool? It is not there in a string constant pool. If it is not there in a string constant pool, then only the entry will be made with respect to mi, and the mi will be pointed by a p1. P1 means a new object with the same name. New object with the same name you have created. That means p1 is now pointing to that particular mi is a new object created. Okay, so mi is a new object created, and that particular object you are pointing with the p1.
Sir,
Yes,
in here in P1 value will be replaced with P1 first value with RCB.
yeah, that only I am telling you. It will
For
not
all,
be a replacement. It
for
will
all
not be
these
a
people.
yeah, that only I am telling you. It will
All
not
this.
be a replacement. Once you say mi will be added. That means a new entry will be made in a string constant pool, right? So when a new entry is made, that particular new entry will be pointed with a p1, right? So after this entry, p1 will now not be pointing to rcb, rather it will be pointing to mi. Okay, so in a string constant pool you will be having only two entries. One entry is rcb, another entry is mi. Who will be pointing to rcb? p2, p3, p4 will be pointing to rcb. p1 will now be pointing to a mi, right? We are just erasing this particular reference, and now this particular reference is pointing to a mi. Clear, right?
Sir,
Yes,
sir, when here in this program, four objects will be created, right?
yes.
Sir,
So
why objects will get created, sir? The declaration and the syntax is of variables, and the syntax is not object syntax.
yeah, yeah.
Here, why can't we think that P1 is a variable of string data type?
Okay, consider in that type only. Consider that a p1 is nothing but a data type of a string variable.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that is a rough way. I should not speak something like that. I just shown you. See, with respect to a strings, you can create a strings in both the ways. I can write string p1 is equal to new string. Like this also I can create. This will also create a string called a p1. So this is actually the beauty of a strings in a Java. So what it says is, even though if you are not writing a new, so this particular p2 means this is another string, this is another string. Okay, so this particular p2 is also an object where the entry of this particular object is there. This particular entry is there in a something called as string constant pool. Where this string constant pool is there, this is there as a part of a heap only. See, when it comes to a data types, you have a two different classification. One is a primitive data type, another one is a derived data type. When I talk about a primitive data type, your int, float, double, long, short, char, all these things are a primitive data type, right? This particular string is not a primitive data type, rather it is a derived data type. That means a new variation of a data type, right? So when I say new variation of a data type, initially I told you that this string belongs to a class called a string. There is a class called a string, for that it belongs. Now what we have said, that particular class is a final class. Final class, you don't have any subclasses for that, right? When I am writing a string followed by p1, then what does it mean? That means that you are creating a reference variable. For what? You are creating a reference variable for a class called a string, right? So what you have to remember is, I can create a strings either by using a new keyword or directly by initializing some value to it. Why this is like that? Because this particular data type string is a part of a heap memory, right? So that is the reason why even objects are created in a heap memory. If you are creating a normal data type called a string, then also the entry will be made in a heap memory itself. So that is the reason why you can create a strings either by using a new keyword or by directly assigning a values to the string, because the area where it is creating a memory is in a heap itself. If I am writing int a, the variable will be created in a stack memory. If I am writing a double x, the variable will be created in a stack memory. If I am using a float y, then a variable will be created in a stack memory. All these primitive data types will use will use a memory from a stack, right? Once it comes to an object, then only the memory will be used from the heap. Actually,
So
good.
this string is a name of class rather than the data type, right, sir?
Yes, absolutely.
And when we don't use new, what we learned is there will be no existence, no physical memory. So even if we don't use new, also will the memory will be allocated, sir, for RCB?
Yes, yes, because that implementation is done with respect to heap memory.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that's a beautiful question asked. Any other questions? If I open a slide of today's session, we, we have just concentrated on only 4 points. That too, last point we have not discussed only, as we have not discussed interfaces. For this point, we have taken 1 hour.
Sir, because it was very
Yes, yes, yes. I understood. Sir, is RCB replaced by M1 in a P1? Yeah, that only I said. It is not like a replaced. Now P1 will be pointing to MI. P1, initially it was pointing to RCB. Now it will be pointing to MI. Thanks for your time and have a nice day.